and welcome to the program. That was a familiar voice. We're going to get to him in just a moment. As most of you know, I have an annual conference every fall, and one of my attendees' favorite guests is with me for the hour today, Pastor J.D. Farag, Calvary Chapel, Kaneohe, Hawaii. J.D. Farag has been a part of my conference activity in 2017, 2018, and again this September 21st. Pastor J.D. Farag does a weekly prophecy update on YouTube. I've watched his online audience grow from, a few thousand to well over 100,000 a week, and mainly by listening up would be a sort of a starving remnant wanting to hear the kind of messages he shares, often left out of our churches today. Now, I had the privilege of ministering at Calvary Chapel, Kaneohe in March of 2018, escaping the winter here in Minnesota that particular month last year. Now, I recently heard, and I catch Pastor JD's prophecy updates on a weekly basis. One caught my attention partly because I actually have a DVD that's very similar to this message, and he was talking in that update now several weeks ago about, I think, what he might call the top 10 prophetic signs going on. And as I say that, I am aware that a lot of signs that we're talking about today really apply more to the tribulation than perhaps even the church age. But if the tribulation signs are casting a shadow today during the church age, please understand how very, very late the hour is. So, Pastor J.D. Farag, welcome back to the program.
It is so great to be with you, Jen.
Yeah, and I really appreciated your 10 signs that are kind of indicative of the lateness of the hour. Pastor J.D., if I could go through the 10 signs with you, and if you don't mind, I'm going to add a few to our discussion that I would see that might be appropriate to add to the list. So could we do that for the hour?
Absolutely, absolutely.
And the only reason I'm going quickly through your number one sign, and it's so important, the mocking, the scoffing, 2 Peter 3, is last weekend I spent the whole hour talking about this with Pastor Tom Hughes and Pastor Brandon Holthouse, the mocking and scoffing of the topic that the King is coming. I'm just referencing that as your number one sign. I'm moving quickly here to number two, and let's discuss number two. The converging alignment of the Ezekiel 38-39 nations, the Gog-Magog alliance, that's going to come against Israel in the latter days. And you said in 2017 that you stopped saying this is future tense in 2017. What do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is that even as recently as 1 year ago, certainly 2 years ago, I could not stand before my church congregation, as is my privilege to do every week, and say that the Ezekiel 38 nations will at some time yet future be in alignment, because now they already are, as we speak, in real time. Russia, Iran, Turkey, and the other nations listed in Ezekiel 38 are at the ready today in Syria for the fulfillment of this prophecy.
There's going to be a hook put in their jaw, according to the Ezekiel passage 38-39, the hook in the jaw. They're going to be lured down, maybe even pulled down, because they want something in Israel so badly. Would it be oil? Would it be natural gas? Would it be technology? My goodness, they can make water out of thin air. What do you think the hook will be?
I think the hook is the prosperity that today Israel prophetically and epically enjoys, as was foretold that they would. I believe there are really 5 things that this alliance of nations not only wants to have, but has to have. Their backs are up against the wall, chief of which is the oil and the natural gas. I also believe it is the technology, and I also believe that it is the water. And then, interestingly, and lastly, number 5, I think it's the gold.
Oh, yes.
The gold that is currently in Israel today.
I think another interesting angle of this conflict, J.D. Farag, is that I don't think any nation intervenes. In other words, I don't think even America intervenes, because the passage says that various nations stand on the sidelines and say, what are you guys doing? But they don't do anything about it. America doesn't do anything about it. Israel is on her own by design, so God can step in.
If you were to ask me what I thought was one of the most compelling and convincing facts that we are witnessing the beginning of Ezekiel 38 coming to pass, that would be it. And I'll be specific to verse 13 of Ezekiel 38, where we're told that it will be Sheba and Dedan, which we know today as modern-day Saudi Arabia, that will not only not be a part of the alliance of nations, but they will be the one nation at the helm of this protest where they question, are you coming to take a spoil? Are you coming to take booty? In other words, they are the one nation that is against this alliance, no surprises, as a Sunni Muslim nation. Also, Iran, of course, as a Shiite Muslim nation. You know, last year when we were in Israel, we had the privilege of having the former ambassador to the United Nations for Israel, Ron Prasor, be our guest speaker. Amir and I did a Q&A with him, and he made a very stunning comment about how that when he was in the UN as the ambassador, there was this unspoken message of, we don't want the world to really know what goes on behind the scenes. And he was speaking to the relationship that Israel today has with Saudi Arabia. It was an interesting comparison. He likened it to a mistress, how that it was kept a secret. He said what we're seeing now is no longer is this going to be kept a secret. It is now out in the open. We have a relationship with Saudi Arabia and the Gulf nations today that we have never had before. I immediately mentioned this verse in Ezekiel 38. Prasor himself, not a believer, but a very intelligent man and very interesting man. He's actually become a friend of mine over the last several years. I did mention this specific verse in Ezekiel 38 about Saudi Arabia having this relationship that he just got done describing with Israel. That is, to me, Jan, the most compelling part of the Ezekiel 38 prophecy. Who knew?
Right.
God knew.
Right. Talking to Pastor J.D. Farag this hour, and I'm basing my discussion off of one of his recent prophecy updates, which you can find on YouTube weekly, where he talked about what he felt were the top 10 sort of signs of the times. I'm going to add to them if time allows. Pastor J.D., I want to move on to number 3 only in the interest of time, and perhaps number 2 and 3 tied together, and that would be an Israeli strike on Damascus, the likelihood of that any day. That's your number 3 sign. So severe would it be, according to the Bible, that Damascus would become uninhabitable. Your comment on that?
My comment on that is that the Isaiah 17:1 prophecy that you're referring to is a trigger, a catalyst prophecy, and I'll explain what I mean by that. Today in Damascus, you have at the ready Russia, Iran, Turkey, and the other nations in alignment. They are just waiting for the green light, as it were, to come from the north there in the Golan on the northern border with Israel, and they will do so when they're done with one Bashar al-Assad, who is just a means to an end. The end game, the goalpost, is Israel. Once Damascus is destroyed, they then will sort of be forced, and you talk about this hook, that is when I believe they will then come from the north, invade Israel. And here we are talking today, Jan. And this one prophecy in Isaiah 17, verse 1 specifically, is on the cusp. It can happen any time. I often comment about how one of these days, if we're still here, if the rapture doesn't come prior to or in concert with this sudden destruction that comes down upon Damascus, we could read in our news feeds tomorrow morning that this is exactly what's happened.
Yeah, the thought is kind of an ominous one, J.D., because Damascus is a huge city. You wonder what could level it so that it's uninhabitable. My mind goes back to the conflict with Saddam Hussein some years ago now, 2003, I believe it was. Some of those weapons of mass destruction hauled out of Iraq into Damascus, I believe. Who knows? Maybe some of those are ignited. We don't know. Text, anyway, says that the city of Damascus will become uninhabitable. Only in the interest of time, I want to move on to your point number 4, which is the setting of the stage for the Daniel 9:27 treaty, which really starts the tribulation, folks. A lot of people wonder what officially starts the tribulation. Does the rapture start the tribulation? Not necessarily, but there's going to be a covenant signed, and it's the Daniel 9:27, 7-year peace agreement between Israel and her enemies, and it's orchestrated by Mr. Antichrist. And there's going to be lots of talk of peace and security, peace and safety going on at the time, and at the 3.5-point year of the tribulation, the Antichrist betrays Israel. And as you say, Pastor J.D. Farag, the tribulation is for the salvation of the Jewish nation. To me, that's so obvious, but a lot of people still don't get that.
So I have, in recent months, become more convinced that this 1 Thessalonians 5:3, where the Apostle Paul says that while they are saying peace and security, sudden destruction will come upon them as a woman travailing in labor. There's the birth pains analogy again. The one time and the one place in the context in which we hear those two words, and we do hear those two words, peace and security, it's always when there's a discussion about the Jews and the Palestinians living side by side in peace and security. I've tried, and I believe that I'm not too far off, and I'm certainly not dogmatic about it, but I've tried to sort of connect the dots between the Daniel 9:27, where the Antichrist then makes this 7-year peace covenant, and it will come, I believe, at a time when the whole world is saying and screaming and begging for peace after what could arguably be the decimating defeat of the Ezekiel 38 war, which I believe, and the prophecy seems to indicate, the details in Ezekiel 38 seem to indicate that this war does not take very long. Some believe it's overnight, within a 24-hour window.
You thought it could be a 24-hour war.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it could come on the heels of, even in concert with, this decimating defeat of this alliance of nations, and then the whole world will embrace the Antichrist and this 7-year peace agreement.
Yes, and then the Jews are actually going to flee to Petra. They wake up and realize this is the false Messiah, the Antichrist, and they seek safety in the shelter of Petra. Folks, when you start hearing peace and security, peace and safety, listen up. It's a really significant phrase that we hear over and over and over.
Not far from where we are gathered today, President Harry Truman spoke at the signing of the North Atlantic Treaty. In the nearly 7 decades since Harry Truman spoke those words, the NATO alliance has been the bulwark of international peace and security.
Well, again, you often hear that in the context of the Middle East, and in that case, it happened to be another context, but just listen up for it because I think it's so significant. It's right out of the Bible, 1 Thessalonians 5:3. Folks, let me just quickly say, because we've been referencing my fall conference, and some of you have purchased tickets, and by the way, you need to get them in the very near future, and again, call the Brushfire Agency, give that number throughout the hour here, or go to brushfire.com. They're only $25, and that includes a lunch, but some of you have already ordered your tickets, and now you can't attend. Would you please turn your tickets in so someone else could purchase them? That's what happened last fall. 700 of you didn't turn them in, and we had 700 empty seats. So if you can't show up, if you turn them in even a couple of days ahead of time, please turn them in right now if you know you can't attend, and someone else will get those tickets, because we've got 5,000 seats for sale, and we hope to fill everyone for the September 21st event this fall near Minneapolis, Minnesota. We'll have a promo about that in just a moment. My speakers include J.D. Farag, Amir Sarfati, Dr. Robert Jeffress, Jack Hibbs, myself, Lori Cardozo-Moore will be there. She'll bring us a greeting and talk to us about her efforts to battle anti-Semitism around the world. So we'll be taking the whole day on Saturday, September 21st. I want to move on. We're talking for the hour to J.D. Farag about what he considers the top 10 signs of the times. We could probably talk about 20 or 30, but we're limiting them here in the interest of time. Number 5, J.D. Farag, the global cry for peace and security. Again, we've kind of referenced that, but you put it sort of under the banner of a two-state solution, Jews and Palestinians living side by side together in peace and security. Can't we all get along? No.
It is so important to understand that the so-called Palestinians do not want peace with Israel. They want the destruction of Israel. This is right out of the playbook of Islam. It started with Muhammad and then Saladin after him. It's basically this: make peace with your enemy, then destroy them. And so this is, and I've talked about this in the past. I know it's very strong when I say it like this, but the so-called two-state solution is a repackaging of Hitler's final solution.
But the world is obsessed with a two-state solution and possibly going to come out maybe this fall. Well, definitely this fall. I don't think we know the content of the two-state solution coming down from Jared Kushner, which makes me moderately nervous, but I'm hoping for the best, as you are.
Yeah, there's a lot of anticipation as to what is in the deal of the century, and it'll be very interesting to see how that all plays out in the upcoming weeks.
Well, you're number 6 out of 10, and that would be Zechariah 12, 1 through 3, and that would be Jerusalem would become an intoxicating obsession of the whole world, efforts to divide her, efforts to possibly make part of Jerusalem a capital city for the so-called Palestinian people. We'll see. I doubt that's going to happen, but it certainly could. I think in a different presidential administration, it will happen. And as you say, J.D. Farag, God says, if you're going to cut Jerusalem in pieces, I'll cut you in pieces. God put his name on this city. You actually talked about that at my conference last fall.
Yeah, the Zechariah 12 prophecy to me is a very fascinating prophecy because it's very blunt. God is very clear and in no uncertain terms says, Jerusalem is my city.
My city.
I put my name of ownership on it, quite literally, by the way. And if you try to move those burdensome boundary stones, you try to divide my city, you try to cut up my city, I will cut you into pieces. And it does describe, and this is chilling, it does describe in verse 3 that this will come at a time when all the nations of the earth are gathered against her. Now here we are with an administration that is arguably the most pro-Israel administration we've ever had. The question, of course, becomes, well, how is that even possible? Because we are one nation now who is still, thankfully, standing with Israel. What I answer that question with is this. When you don't know, you fall back on what you do know, and what you do know is that there is coming a day, and it can happen very quickly. Things in America can change overnight.
Talking to J.D. Farag for the hour. He's pastor of Calvary Chapel, Kaneohe, Hawaii. You can learn more at his website, which is the Calvary Chapel, Kaneohe. Follow him on the YouTube channel. You can just go to YouTube and type in his name, and it's a weekly prophecy update. It's got well over 100,000 weekly viewers now, which is for YouTube and for a Christian channel. That's very, very encouraging to see that kind of response. And again, it's partly because our churches have kind of turned this topic off a little bit. We've talked about that before on this program. I don't need to revisit that. There's always information available online if you're able to access it. I want to move on. He gave an update, this is some weeks ago now, about what he might consider sort of the top 10 things to be observing in our times. The Bible talks about signs of the times, and as I said, introducing the program, some of these signs are referencing the tribulation, but if they're casting a shadow now, I mean, that's very, very significant. And that the church disappears before the tribulation. I always say, even if these are signs referring to the tribulation, some certainly are church age, but If they're referring to the tribulation casting a shadow now, we should be paying even double attention. You're number 7 in your lineup. J.D. Farag, spend just an extra minute on this, and I'm going to add something to it if you don't mind. You state and you cite the rise in wickedness, and my goodness, I've even thought of making a special presentation on this topic, and you've got the rise of witchcraft, you've got just a casual approach, J.D., to abortion, and you and I talked about this last time you were on the program, and how you take that so personally. I mean, we've got school shootings. I want to throw something else in the mix, though, and that is, at the same time, the rise of strong delusion, sort of a 1-2 punch, rise in wickedness, and then the rise in strong delusion. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would. And I will take it a step further and suggest that when you reject the truth, you then open yourself up to the deception, the delusion of the antithesis of the truth, and that is Satan himself. Jesus is the truth. Satan is the father of lies. So when you reject Jesus, the truth, you then give yourself over to the lie, the powerful delusion. And in Luke's gospel, Jesus very specifically likens his return to the days of Noah. In other words, when I come back, it's going to be like it was in Noah's day, and you need look no further than to Genesis 6 to get an understanding of what it was like in the days of Noah. It says that in Genesis 6:5, the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And then you fast forward to Lot in Sodom and Gomorrah, and it is a very, I believe, clear description of the world in which we live today.
Let me play a clip to complement what we're talking about.
Fast forward nearly 2,000 years later, and we find that the world is seeing all these predicted end-time signs happening, just as Jesus predicted. God always gives us signs and warnings before he is about to do something. For 120 years, God used Noah to warn the people that the flood was coming. The ark, nearly half the size of the Titanic, stood in Noah's driveway for 120 years as a sign that the flood was coming. Only 8 people listened and were saved. God has been warning us for nearly 2,000 years that he would return, and has given us nearly 100 predicted signs that would happen before his return. Many of these signs have been happening since creation, but Jesus said, "When you see all these signs happening at the same time, know that my return is near." That time is now. We are the generation that is seeing all the end-time signs being fulfilled. Biblical prophecy fulfillment is in a period of acceleration, a time of quickening. The world is racing toward Armageddon, and now, more than ever, we must be ready. We are about to enter a time like no other, a time that no man has ever seen, a time like no other time in the history of this world. As a matter of fact, we are about to enter the end of the end times. Since the dawn of mankind, there have always been wars and rumors of wars, earthquakes, famines, pestilences, disease, strange weather, and false Christs, just as Jesus predicted. It's been nearly 2,000 years since Jesus made this prediction, but read any newspaper or view any news site, and you have today's headlines lining up exactly with the Word of God.
You have the number here for you to possibly order those tickets to Understanding the Times 2019, where we talk about some of the issues. We're spending the hour today, spending it with Pastor J.D. Farag. He's one of my guests this fall on Saturday, September the 21st, along with Dr. Robert Jeffress, Amir Sarfati, Pastor Jack Hibbs, yours truly, and others. And if you'd like to get your tickets, please do. 888-338-5338. 888-338-5338. That's not Olive Tree Ministries. That's the Brush Fire Agency. You can do it online, brushfire.com. The event is Saturday, September 21st, just outside Minneapolis. I believe it's our 23rd such conference since 2001. and we'll be selling approximately 5,000 tickets for the event on Saturday, September 21st. Again, if you cannot attend, remember, turn in those tickets, turn them right back into Brushfire. Someone else will purchase them, and we'll try to have a full house on Saturday, September 21st. I'm coming back in just a minute. We're going to continue with Pastor J.D. Farag. Find more at his YouTube channel, and you can find more at his website, Calvary Chapel, Kaneohe. That's Kaneohe, Hawaii. We'll be back in just a minute or two. Don't go away.
Churches and ministries do not slow down in the middle of summer, so let us hear from you. Drop us a note through our website, olivetreeviews.org. That's olivetreeviews.org. You can call us Central Time at 763-559-4444. That's 763-559-4444. Or write us through our post office box. All gifts are tax deductible. Write to Jan Markell and Olive Tree Ministries, Box 1452, Maple Grove, Minnesota 55311. That's Box 1452, Maple Grove, Minnesota 55311. You can also text to give. Consult our website. We're back in a moment. Understanding the Times 2019 is around the corner, Saturday, September 21, just outside of Minneapolis. Do you have your tickets yet? If not, call the Brushfire Agency at 1-888-338-5338. That's 1-888-338-5338. Or just go online to brushfire.com. We are selling general admission tickets for $25, and that includes a lunch. If you have purchased a ticket and cannot attend, please turn in your ticket to Brushfire so others can purchase them. Speakers include Dr. Robert Jeffress, Amir Sarfati, Pastor J.D. Farag, Pastor Jack Hibbs, Jan Markell, and Lori Cardozo Moore. We begin at 8:45 a.m. on September 21 and conclude at 5 p.m. The destination is Grace Church in Eden Prairie, Minnesota, near Minneapolis. Even hotels are selling out, so visit our website, olivetreeviews.org, and go to our conference page for hotel information. If you cannot journey to Minneapolis, the event will be live streamed at no cost. Consult our website for details. Come and meet 5,000 like-minded remnant believers on Saturday, September 21. Learn why things aren't falling apart, they are falling into place.
You go to every nation, the leader of that nation today is despised. And I believe it is setting the stage for this final leader, the Antichrist, to come on the scene. And they will give their allegiance to him.
Jan Markell and Pastor J.D. Farag continue their discussion on the very obvious signs of the times in this segment. If you would like to see our radio program, visit our YouTube channel under Jan Markell. We insert images and video into the program for those who better retain visual pictures and videos. If you are on the run, download the oneplace.com mobile app, and the program will be downloaded to your devices on Saturday morning. Now here are Jan and J.D.
It gets worse. Just this week, Michelle Bachmann actually predicted that I would bring about the biblical end of days. Now that's a legacy. That's big. I mean, Lincoln, Washington, they didn't do that.
Oh, yes, we just mock and we scoff, but that's fulfilling the Bible, so go ahead, be my guest. Welcome back to Understanding the Times Radio, spending the hour with Pastor J.D. Farag, Calvary Chapel, Kaneohe, Hawaii. Let me quickly say that why don't you sign up for my print and e-newsletter where we talk about these kinds of issues? If you do, write to us. Would you always tell us how you listen? Some of you are now listening on YouTube, where we insert images to various things we're talking about, even video we insert. but we're airing on about 850 wonderful radio stations that we appreciate so much. Thank you for listening to them. Thank you for supporting them. The program is posted to my website as well, Saturday morning, oneplace.com, our YouTube channel, Saturday. So if you're really on the go, running to and fro, then you can listen electronically at your leisure. Otherwise, we air various times throughout heavily the weekend on the various radio stations. Now, I kind of like to move on into our programming because the hour gets away quickly. I'm covering what Pastor Farag, he talked about some weeks ago, that's sort of the top 10 things he's noticed as signs of the times. The Bible said these things would happen. We're seeing them begin to sort of, wind up. We were talking about the rise in wickedness, and I threw in there the rise of strong delusion. My goodness, when you hear people like John Kerry say, climate change is more dangerous than global terrorism, you know strong delusion is going. When you understand that the left celebrates the fact that anybody should be able to select any bathroom they want to go in. You've got your little 6-year-old grandchild in the ladies' bathroom and a 300-pound gentleman comes in. That's a pretty scary thought. It's strong delusion. It's a sign of the time. It's a dumbing down. People can't make sense of the obvious. It's celebrating depravity. It's the rise in wickedness, the rise in some of the darkness that's going on. And JD, if you want to add to that, otherwise I'll move on, but I don't want to cut us off because that's such an important, that was your number 7, so important.
Yes. The increase of wickedness globally, I believe, is so significant, and it is the likes of which we have never seen before, nor will we ever see again.
Can you imagine the tribulation? Thankfully, we don't have to, but can you imagine the insanity going on at that time when the church that's holding the lid on everything is gone?
At a time when we need to be talking about it the most, it is the time that it is the most silent.
Absolutely. All right, I'll move on then to your point number 8 of his top 10. And by the way, I'm throwing in some, so we're going to end up with more like 15 signs that I think are quite important, that we should be watching as we wait. Then that would be the rush towards global currency. There's talk now, JD, about cryptocurrency. We hear about Bitcoin. Mark Zuckerberg wants to have crypto coin by 2020. Talk to me a little bit why you put this as number 8.
I put that at number 8 because it coincides with everything else that we've been talking about, and I sort of packaged it with number 9, if you don't mind, because that is the prophecy in Daniel 12, verse 4, about the increase of knowledge. And it is my belief that it's not just the increase of knowledge in the technological view, but more so, I believe, an increase of the knowledge of Bible prophecy, because in that same chapter, Daniel is told to seal up the book until the time of the end, and that is when there will be the increased knowledge of that which is written. This cryptocurrency, this global currency, it is very interesting as you look at the world's markets right now, and the advent of Bitcoin, and now, of course, Facebook next year wanting to bring out this Libra currency. And it is really, I believe, the way that the Antichrist will bring about a one-world economic system vis-a-vis this mark, which the technology for that exists today as we speak. Interesting, by the way, if I can parenthetically say, the technology that we have today matches the technology that is described in Bible prophecy. In other words, the technology in 5 years from now, maybe 10 years from now, it would in effect exceed the technology that is described in the Bible, meaning that if that technology were that advanced, then certainly the Bible would describe that kind of technology, but it doesn't. It's describing the technology that we have already. It exists now.
I'd like to compliment what you're saying with a little clip here. It's Catherine Albrecht. She happens to be on CBN.
The reality of mobile lifestyles has increased demands on mobile computers, and all eyes are now on the upcoming release of the iWatch. More than just a watch, the iWatch will have processing abilities like a computer and communication abilities like a smartphone. It will also have Apple Pay capabilities, raising concerns with critics that society is getting too close for comfort to invasive technologies. Joining us now is consumer privacy expert and author of the children's book, I Won't Take the Mark, Dr. Catherine Albrecht. Welcome, Dr. Albrecht.
Hello, Mark. It's great to talk about this because I think it's one of the least talked about issues in the Christian community today. We have actually moved in the last maybe 10 or 15 years, according to research, from a world in which the vast majority of Americans would say they would never take a microchip implant or a payment device on their right hand, to a world in which now you have the vast majority of Apple users super excited about the new iWatch. You also have, according to some recent published studies, up to 50% of Americans saying that they would welcome an implanted device in their hand if it would do those same things that the iWatch does. So we're kind of moving closer and closer to that right hand and closer to the fulfillment of biblical prophecy about the mark of the beast.
We can already use smartphones for financial information and transactions. What about using those implanted chips for the same purpose?
Well, we've seen in recent weeks, Mark, in Sweden, there was a chipping party back in November in which 8 people were implanted with microchips by, in this case, they were hobbyists, and it was a very tattooed, body-modified person who injected them into them. That same individual has now taken an entire office building in Sweden and implanted many of the employees there, hooking up the office door and the photocopiers and a number of other things around the office so that you merely have to scan the chip in your hand in order to access them. So certainly Scandinavian countries seem very big on this. We had a big press conference just a couple of weeks ago in Finland in which the CEO of a major corporation claimed to be the very first person to accept digital payment into his hand implant in the form of Bitcoin. So it's certainly gaining momentum. The proponents of this claim that up to 1,000 people worldwide have been implanted with this technology, and they're really seeing this as the wave of the future.
Pastor J.D. Farag, often what happens with this global currency discussion, it comes along with it, this discussion of chipping. And here she says 50% of Americans would welcome implanted devices in their hands for transactions. So, again, the stage is being set.
So this goes back to the technology.
Yeah, it goes back to technology.
In place today. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when and even how soon. As far as the acceptance, and this again sort of ties in with this thought that the rapture would happen simultaneously with, in concert with this sudden destruction, catastrophic on a global scale that comes down upon them, and we go up and don't think for a second that there won't be this rush to accept some sort of a technology that can track where you are, because where are they?
Again, we go back to the unparalleled increase of knowledge. Is it of all things knowledge? Bible prophecy, perhaps? Daniel 12:4, many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. Point number 8 was the rush towards global currency, the crypto coin, etc. And number 9, again, is the unparalleled increase, as I just said, J.D. Farag, of knowledge, again, Bible prophecy, Daniel 12:4. Do you want to make any other comment?
With number 9 and the prophecy in Daniel 12, verse 4, it is how do I say it? Connects the dots, for lack of a better way of saying it, with this convergence of all of these prophecies, because once the Antichrist sets up this one world monetary system, a one world religion, a one world government, and interesting thought, and think about this, every world leader today in every country is hated, particularly here in America. Israel, you go to every nation, the leader of that nation today is despised, and I believe it is setting the stage for this final leader the Antichrist to come on the scene, and they will give their allegiance to him.
Well, that's one I was going to add to the mix, and we're going through your 10 signs, but if I could add one, I'm going to add 2 or 3 before we're finished here, probably more than that. That would be the longing for a leader, the longing for a man with a plan. There are some leaders in Europe that are getting a lot of attention. I think there are some leaders in other parts of the world. The point is, the world longs for one man to come along and solve it all, fix it all, make it right.
He is alive and well today.
Yeah, he is.
He just has not been revealed yet, and he cannot be revealed, I believe, until the church is removed.
Absolutely. Cannot be revealed until then. Your point number 10, and parts of the country appreciate this more than other parts of the country. Point number 10 is the increase in frequency and intensity of earthquakes. We actually opened the program with a little clip of you, one of your updates, talking about exactly that in various places, the greater intensity, the greater frequency. You kind of expanded that whole category to just general chaotic weather, which I would agree with. The greater frequency and intensity of some of the chaos. The Bible certainly references earthquakes, and I think this is a tribulation experience, and again, that's casting a huge shadow on our time now as things begin to exponentially increase. Folks, that's the 2 key words, exponential increase. Go ahead, JD.
So in Luke 21:28, one of my favorite verses in all of the Bible, Jesus said, when you see these things, keyword, begin to come to pass, look up and lift up your heads. Why? Because your redemption draws near. Now, here's the thing. When I did this top 10 prophecies that I believe are in play today, pointing to the very soon return of the Lord for the rapture of his church, it was back in May, prior to what we just saw happen and is still happening in California.
Yes.
Earthquake-prone California. What was different this time, and this is what I believe Jesus was saying in Matthew 24, that you're going to have these earthquakes increasing with frequency and intensity, and it's going to come in various ways and in diverse places. And this was interesting, watching the coverage post the 6.4 earthquake, because they were saying that there's another one coming. And sure enough, a 7.1 quake that was felt as far as Nevada. When they were asked in a press conference, this is the USGS and some of the local experts that were there at this press conference, when they were asked, well, isn't this unusual that an aftershock is actually bigger than the earthquake itself? In other words, we had a 6.4 and we have a 7.1 aftershock? And they had no answer. And of course, some suggest that maybe that's by design so that it doesn't create or cause panic. But what really struck me was how suddenly earthquakes happen. And on July 4th in California, people did not get up that day thinking to themselves, hey, what if there's an earthquake today? It just happened unexpectedly. I think about what Jesus said in Matthew 24, verse 44, behold, I come at a time you expect not. But here's the thing. California knows they're going to have earthquakes. The warnings have been sounded. They know, quote, the big one's coming. And so now, all of a sudden, people are on high alert. Because 6.4, 7.1, they suggest that there are going to be, over the period of the next few months, a total of 6 months, some 34,000 aftershocks. That is unprecedented. That is unprecedented. So now I'm thinking to myself, well, we, in the prophetic sense, have been warned. The big one's coming, and it's not an earthquake. It's the Lord. And we're going to have these signs, these aftershocks, if you will, that will lead up to the big one. And we need to be on high alert.
I want to throw in just a few more as time allows. Talking to J.D. Farag for the hour, Calvary Chapel, Kaneohe, Hawaii. Might want to visit his church if you're vacationing in Hawaii. And as I ministered there in March of 2018, met many radio listeners who were visiting Calvary Chapel, Kaneohe. They were vacationing at the time. I want to throw in just a few more Pastor Farag, and that would be, I think we have to include character we have right now, anyway, on the scene, and that is a rather charismatic, unconventional pope who actually wants to control Jerusalem. He made an alliance with Turkey's Erdogan to control Jerusalem. The two of them together. I believe Rome is Mystery Babylon. So when we see Pope Francis kind of hobnobbing around the world and doing some very charismatic activities, I pay attention.
As do I. There are many who are watching this Pope. I am personally of the belief that he will usher in, perhaps as some believe, as the false prophet, the Antichrist himself.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think that's very possible. Again, I believe Rome is Mystery Babylon, and I know there are other theologies out there, but I hold to the teaching that Rome is Mystery Babylon. Therefore, when we see such a charismatic and unconventional pope as Pope Francis, he has stated he wants to control Jerusalem. That is huge. Made an alliance with Turkey's Erdogan to control Jerusalem together. That's just huge. We need to pay attention to these things. They don't just happen out of the blue for no reason at all. Usually there's some sort of a roadmap in the Bible that will tell you this is going to happen or something similar to it is going to happen. If we're paying attention, most people aren't paying attention, which is why we try to bring out some of these things on this radio program each week. A few other items I'd like to throw into the mix, the top 12, 13, 15 or so. And folks, I do have a DVD teaching Why We May Be the Terminal Generation, 15 Signs of His Imminent Return. If you'd like to find that in my store or give my office a call, it's in my various newsletters, print and e-newsletter, and it talks about some of the things we're talking about today. It's in DVD form, 60 minutes. You can show it to a small group if you'd like, or a Sunday school class. A couple of other items, Pastor J.D. Farag. The rise predicted in the Bible. You will be hated of all nations for my sake. A rise of anti-Semitism and Christian persecution. I'm paying attention. Many aren't, but I'm paying attention to that.
So I've heard it said, and I have quoted this saying, and I know it's maybe a little bit silly in a way. Israel is real. In other words, Israel is real, and you know Israel is real, and God is real because of Israel. You just need look no further than to this nation, God's people, and to see the satanic hatred, and it is satanic hatred.
Right.
And it started actually, believe it or not, in the book of Genesis with Cain and Abel. See, Satan is not omnipotent. He's not omniscient. He's not all-knowing. He knew that the seed would be born of the woman. This is the virgin birth, the proto-evangelicum in Genesis 3:15. But what he didn't know is from whom would the seed come. So he sought, from the very beginning, he possessed demonically Cain to murder Abel, thinking that it would come from Abel. It didn't. It came from Seth. So you fast forward throughout the entirety of the Old Testament, and what do you find? You find demon-possessed people like Pharaoh trying to kill all of the Hebrews. You go to the book of Esther, fascinating book, and a demon-possessed Haman who gets the king to issue this edict to destroy all of the Hebrews. You go into the New Testament. Jesus, his first coming, Satan could not stop his first coming. He will not stop his second coming. And so he possesses demonically a Herod who has all of the boys murdered, slaughtered, butchered. I mean, so evil. Then you go to the last century with a demon-possessed Hitler who has sought to destroy the Jews. That should tell you something.
That's right.
Of all of the people on earth in the history of mankind, Israel is real, and God is real because of Israel.
Well, along that same line, I'm back to Jerusalem again, and that is another sign I'd like to throw into the mix, and that's Third Temple activity. You've got the Sanhedrin forming, you've got talk of a rebuilt Third Temple, you've got red heifers being born in Israel. This is, I think, almost on overdrive right now. I actually did a program with Billy Crone 4 or 5 weeks ago. My goodness, the stats listening to that program off the chart, because folks do have an interest in the fact that a temple is going to be Antichrist temple, but interest is going on in it as we speak.
When it comes to prophecies like the rebuilding of the Third Temple, which will be present during the 7-year tribulation, when it comes to prophecies like that, I think about how that prophecy in general has a shelf life, an expiration date, and I'll explain what I mean by that. Let's rewind 5 years ago and look at how much has happened just in the last 5 years, how much has changed. And then let's fast forward another 5 years and take that template of how much has changed in the last 5 years and superimpose it on the next 5 years. And what you'll find is that as fast as everything is going, it would stand to reason that in 5 years, all of the things that are in place today would no longer still be in place 5 years from now. I think back on the Ezekiel 38 prophecy, just in the last 2 years, how this is lined up. But things move so fast, change so quickly, that it's not unreasonable to suggest that even 2 years from now, you may still not have this alliance between Russia, Iran, and Turkey. I think about the temple. Everything that is now at the ready today, fast forward 5 years from now, well, the conditions may not still be the same as they are today.
Good thought. Third temple activity, absolutely on overdrive. I think one of the most prominent things going on today, if you're paying attention, and particularly if you're paying attention to some of the things going on in Israel, following some of the Israeli press. JD, we've got the term convergence. We've got the convergence of all these things. You know, you and I could talk. We could throw in another 20 things to talk about, but we've got the convergence of all of this on overdrive. It's just stunning. I don't think we had this convergence even 10 to 15 years ago, but we do now.
I believe that. I would even say as recently as 5 years
Yes,
ago.
I would too.
That the convergence was not as it is today. A couple of weeks ago, I did a prophecy update on the prophecies that have already been fulfilled.
That's right. It was excellent.
Since 1948. One of the conclusions that we can draw from that is that starting with May 14th, 1948, with the rebirth of Israel as a nation in one day, the fulfillment of Isaiah 66:8, it set in motion all of the prophecies now that will come quickly, converging together, and we are witnessing that now.
We carry Amir Sarfati's book titled The Last Hour, and he titled it for a reason. He titled it because he, along with a number of us, Jack Hibbs, J.D. Farag, myself, so many others, Pastor Billy Crone, so many that visit my radio program and my conference activity, believe that we are literally in the closing hour of history as we know it. And that's why we always appreciate that Pastor J.D. Farag usually closes his prophecy update with a call to salvation, because we want no one to be left behind, go through the terrible time of calamity known as the tribulation and the great tribulation. For a child of God, the church is spared that kind of horrific tribulation. So, JD, I am down to literally a minute or two if you would like to wrap it up with a call to the lateness of the hour, and let's give our hearts to the Lord Jesus while we have time. It's all yours.
This is the gospel of Jesus Christ, the good news of salvation in Jesus Christ, who came and was crucified and buried and rose again on the third day and is coming back one day. He paid in full the debt for all of our sin. The Bible says all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. I always like to present the ABCs of salvation because it's a childlike explanation of how to be saved. The A is for admit you're a sinner, or acknowledge that you've sinned. This is what repentance is. It's a change of one's mind, a turning from sin and a turning to the Savior. The B is for believe that Jesus is Lord, and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead. This is what Romans 9 and 10 says. And then lastly, the C is for call upon the name of the Lord. Romans 10:13 says, all who call upon the name of the Lord will, not might, could, or should, no, will be saved. You might be listening to this radio broadcast today, wherever you are. And it's not by accident that God led you to this program. It is for such a time as this. I implore you, the Lord's return is nigh, and today is the day of salvation.
like to kind of close. I haven't used this little saying in recent weeks, and I think it'd be appropriate to do so. First of all, I want to thank Pastor J.D. Farag for giving up an hour today to challenge us, most importantly, to challenge us with the call to salvation. There's nothing more important on the face of the earth, folks, particularly when time is running out. That's been the point of this hour. It's not been to look at signs of the times, and it's fine to be excited about that, but there's a reason for being excited. Time's running out. Eternity is awaiting us. I like to close with this every now and then. It says this: when the time was right, the sea parted, the walls fell down. The lions went hungry, the sun stood still, the waves were calm, the stone was rolled away, the clouds were parted, and the Lord ascended. And when the time is right, I'm going to say that again, when the time
you.